Hi everyone, thanks for joining us. I have the profound pleasure to be here today with James Carroll, who is the CEO of Thor Photomedicine and is responsible for bringing the NOVOTHOR bed to the world, as well as many other really important medical technologies. And I was somewhat of an early adopter of photobiomodulation therapies, and I've had a NOVOTHOR now for about 6 years. And now at JYZEN, we have 3 NOVOTHORs that we are wrapping into all of our medical protocols for people, and our members are taking advantage of the NOVOTHOR. All 3 machines are booked pretty much all day, every day. And we have the pleasure of having James visiting from the UK. So I thought this would be a great opportunity to kind of lay out some of the science behind why the NOVOTHOR works so well, and just what, maybe you could just tell us a little bit about the origin story here. Like, how did you kind of decide to put this together?
Well, I got involved in photobiomodulation starting in 1987.
Wow.
Having been an engineer designing radio stations back in the late 70s, 80s, I got into assisting companies find grants and raising grant money to do medical research. And one of our customers was a photobiomodulation company. So I gave up my job to work for them, because when I saw what it could do, I thought, this is going to be in every corner of every department of every hospital in the whole world. I imagined, back in 1987,
wow,
it would take 5 years. Yes, thank you for laughing. And so that's where I got started. That company failed after 3 years. I started my own. So I had an engineering background in 1991. And by 2017, I was beginning to wonder what was going to make it go mainstream, because it wasn't a mainstream treatment anywhere. Maybe for a few hospitals, so mostly we're medical. I know a lot of people use it in sport and wellness, and just general health. But my primary goals have always been aimed at dealing with difficult medical conditions. I like central nervous system disorders.
Me too.
So the brain, the eye, the spinal cord, non-healing wounds, chronic pain, particularly neuropathic pain.
Yeah.
I mean, these are awful, and medicine has very few solutions, if any, for these conditions. So that's really got my attention. And by 2017, I'm thinking, when's this going to happen? I mean, at that point, we were probably, we being the industry, the researchers, the device industry, the researchers of the field, I'm thinking that when's this going to become a mainstream, a standard of care anywhere for anything? And we were approaching that point, I suppose, 800 randomized placebo-controlled clinical trials published in the field. And that's when I began to take an interest in the business of medicine and understanding something I didn't know before, and that is FDA do not approve therapies like this. They approve products that deliver therapies. And if you don't understand how you get through FDA, how you get procedure codes from the American Medical Association, how you get reimbursement codes from CMS in America, how that works and moves on to private medical insurers, who and what key opinion leaders are, champions within hospitals, getting it in clinical care guidelines. If you don't understand that, it doesn't end up being taught in medical schools, and it doesn't go mainstream. So that's, in a really short period of time, my kind of origin story through to what occupies me most at the moment is understanding that market access journey that photobiomodulation has barely started, despite over nearly 10,000 academic papers on this subject.
Yeah, and I think you did get clinical approval for one indication.
Yes,
right?
so in terms of, in the UK, the National Institute of Health and Care Excellence recommend it for the treatment or prevention of a side effect from high-dose chemotherapy and radiotherapy called oral mucositis. And then the Multinational Association for Supportive Care in Cancer, their guidelines now recommend it. And a global organization based in the United States, I think, called the Children's Oncology Group. So kids going through bone marrow transplant need high-dose chemotherapy. They don't just get oral mucositis, they get it in their esophagus, all the way through their gastrointestinal tract, all the way through to their anus, and there was no solution.
I think we should just tell our audience what that is. So when you go through chemotherapy, it kills rapidly dividing cells, and the cells that line your mouth and entire intestinal tract are rapidly dividing. So their division is impaired by the chemotherapy. And so people can end up with injury in the mucosal surfaces and ulcerations and things like that. And it very much reduces survival rates, because when someone has a sore, inflamed mouth and intestinal tract, they literally don't feel like eating, and it's painful to eat. And that is one of the reasons why cancer patients die. So your therapy has been literally life-saving.
Yes, so, and I'll give 2 other stories that associate that. And we could stay on that one subject all day, but I'll move it along. In our UK National Health Service, the biggest cancer hospital in the UK, have done a little study and shown that the head and neck cancer patients, 30% of which need to come and stay in hospital because they can't eat, drink or swallow, as you were describing, of that 30%, we've reduced the hospitalisation by 88.7%.
Oh my God.
And our third biggest hospital in the UK did it by an almost identical number, 88.9% reduction in hospitalisation for people who couldn't. Yes. And St Jude's Hospital, all Americans will know, are using it on children. And both in the UK and the United States, we encourage the oncologists to get the patients to treat themselves. They put a lollipop, a light-emitting lollipop, a photobiomodulation lollipop inside their mouth, and it illuminates the whole oral cavity. We do extra oral treatment, so through the cheeks to get light to the buccal mucosa. And we get the kids to do it themselves, and then the lollipop they find easy, and the outside they do find easy. And we're talking like 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds. And then they started, because their tummy hurts, they started treating there, and they started showing they did an analysis of the effects on the GI tract, and there were less GI-related side effects from their high-dose chemotherapy, and now they're going to do a proper randomized controlled clinical trial.
This is so important, and I think this would be a great opportunity to talk about why. So why is this helping? I think because then this will kind of lend itself to discussing other applications of this treatment.
So I did say that at some earlier point in our conversation that this is the Multinational Association for Supported Carrying Cancer said for prevention or treatment of oral mucositis. So treating it means that you've got symptoms, you treat it and it goes away. Prevention means you treat before people have any symptoms. And so this treatment seems to be, and we've known it for decades, highly anti-inflammatory.
Right.
So it seems to reduce the amount of oxidative stress. So you get the right balance of reactive oxygen species. You do sometimes need more ROS. They do good things. They help trigger differentiation of stem cells, for example. But you don't want too much of it too long. We have antioxidant mechanisms in the body. And photobiomodulation to reduce the oxidative stress. And we know that part of that is it improves the antioxidant mechanisms, so superoxide dismutase, glutathione peroxidase, what's the other one, catalase, seems to be more active. So you've got these wonderful antioxidant mechanisms in action and reducing the too much ROS for too long associated with causing it. But it seems in healthy people you can do it, and it seems to have set up the same mechanisms. So we know from cell studies that when you put have a culture of not stem cells, but any cell type, and you put photobiomodulation light on it, and you look for them to do what you think their job is. Maybe their job is to make new tissue, so you might have fibroblasts producing more collagen or something, or just proliferating. And if they're not stressed, you put light on them, nothing appears to happen. But if you try to kill them, so you put methanol or something in, bombard them with X-rays, it should kill the cells, and it doesn't. If you pre-treat them photobiomodulation. So it's got this preventative mechanism, as well as if you treat them afterwards, we reduce inflammation.
So because what I was going to say is it like in the human body, it's not necessarily, well, tell me if I'm wrong, is not necessarily reducing the reactive oxygen species, but increasing the body's ability to handle those.
Yeah, so it does actually, so there's usually a spike of ROS, and it goes up before it comes down.
Right.
Ultimately, you've got fewer ROS in terms of, would you expect to find in an injury or a degenerative condition associated with aging? Then yes, you actually in the short term, like within minutes, you begin to, or within hours, you see a spike of ROS, reactive oxygen species, that ultimately lead to stimulating, I don't know how nerdy your audience is, but gene transcription factor, NF-kappa B, which makes all the inflammatory cytokines that lead to cell death and inflammation and the aging process generally. You get a spike of it for a short time, and ultimately, though, it goes below baseline. So ultimately, it does reduce it, but you get a spike first before it comes down.
But you're engendering the body's kind of multifactorial ability to handle that as well. And so I just love when there is a therapy that's working kind of in concert with the body's mechanisms. And so you mentioned one mechanism where reducing oxidative stress, increasing antioxidants, and therefore you're going to reduce inflammation that way. What other mechanisms have been shown in research with photobiomodulation?
As you know, we get increased cellular energy, the ATP, the energy currency of the cell, so more of that. And we trigger the regenerative mechanisms as well. So TGF-beta1, for example, would be one that would help tell stem cells what to do, for example.
Right. Let's dive into the mitochondrial research a little bit, because to me, that's the holy grail in medicine. I'd say most all conditions that I see have a mitochondrial dysfunction at their root. Even aging does. I think we age because our mitochondria become more dysfunctional with time. And so how does, just for our audience benefit, the photobiomodulation therapy, how does that enhance mitochondrial function?
So some of your audience might have done a bit of biology at school, and they will have heard of the electron transport chain, the flow of electrons through various complexes, and they reach the last complex, complex 4, called cytochrome C oxidase, and it's the terminal enzyme of the electron transport chain. Nothing will happen there. No electrons will flow. No proton gradients from the matrix to the intermembrane space will happen. No proton gradient. No ATP production until oxygen comes along, and oxygen takes electrons off the end of the electron transport chain. So it grabs those, and that's what allows electron flow to happen. And then all of a sudden you start making energy, and you've got a more efficient system. And by the way, if you do have like a blocked cytochrome C oxidase, it's not happening. If there's not enough oxygen, that's when you make too much reactive oxygen species. But the wonderful thing is we see this immediate effect. You put photobiomodulation in, it's absorbed in mitochondria, and you suddenly get this spike in oxygen consumption, followed by a spike in this production of reactive oxygen species, which then settles down, and you've got this increase in ATP, and it's all to do with something to do with we are somehow enabling cytochrome C oxidase in mitochondria to take up more oxygen. Then everything seems to level out and starts behaving better.
And what I have read, and tell me if you agree with this, is that the cytochrome C oxidase enzyme is photosensitive.
Yes, it is.
So it's like the rods and cones in our eyes.
That's right.
It actually will change configuration when exposed to certain wavelengths of light.
It's called a chromophore.
It's a chromophore.
It refers to colours. And colour, anything that's got colour means it's either reflecting and or absorbing certain wavelengths of light. Yes.
Right. So the light in the red and near infrared wavelengths will induce this configurational change in that enzyme, which can liberate it.
Yes.
So can you talk about what blocks cytochrome C oxidase in kind of disease processes and in natural aging?
So when we're sick, when we're injured, when we're stressed, because gradually as old, it seems that nitric oxide blocks respiration. It gets in there instead of oxygen. It competitively displaces oxygen.
Yes.
And that goes away when we put this light into patients.
So it almost like liberates the enzyme.
It does, absolutely. Yes.
Enabling it to be more functional again.
Yes. Absolutely. So it helps. There's a process which is disputed how it works. There's something called photodissociation, which seemed to be the method by which it worked. But somehow, rather than, we used to say displaces or photodissociates, but it seems somehow to be, and it seems to be metabolizing the nitric oxide. It just disappears or goes somewhere by whatever mechanism, allows oxygen in, and then everything I previously said follows.
That is so beautiful. This is going to sound strange. I do a lot of testing with a lab called IGL in Germany, and they're measuring toxins of various sorts, heavy metals, mycotoxins, etc., many of which I think have a binding predilection for cytochrome C, because they're also looking at mitochondrial markers in this testing. And I feel that I can detoxify people of those chemical compounds better if I combine my detox protocols with NOVOTHOR.
Right.
It's really interesting. I feel that the light is also liberating the enzyme from the toxins, which can also suppress cytochrome C oxidase.
Right. I'm not schooled in mold or in heavy metals, so I can't really contribute much to that. You're now the expert on that one.
But it really appears to be the case. People that have, we've been working on detoxifying for years, and they're still testing very high. They start working with the NOVOTHOR, and all of a sudden they make tons of headway. So it's very interesting. I think some research needs to be done there. But let's talk other mechanisms.
Sure.
So you mentioned growth factors and growth factor elaboration from the red light and near infrared light exposure. Tell me what you've learned about that.
So I talk about TGF-beta1, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, and there's more than keep in mind, I'm an engineer, so I'm already a long way from my schooling on my subject. The downstream effects of the changes in ROS trigger these growth factors through mechanisms that are something I'm not schooled in, but I've heard of them. I can repeat what they are, a little bit about where they go and what they do, but there's no doubt that we are switching these things on, and we see regeneration improved in skin, muscle, tendon, bone, ligaments, central nervous system, sensory nervous system as well. So it's in the brain and the eye. I think one of the most interesting areas is probably the effect of photobiomodulation on dry, age-related macular degeneration. So there's growth factors in the retina as well. So AMD, age-related macular degeneration, is the leading cause of blindness in America and any developed country in the world. There's about 15 or so million people with a diagnosis right now, and they're all going to be blind within 10 years. For those with the dry form, it's untreatable. If you have the wet form, you can have injections in your eye to slow progression. The dry form is considered untreatable. Unfortunately, 90% of patients have the untreatable dry form. So once you've got a diagnosis, there's nowhere to go. Nothing works. However, advanced information, because full disclosure, I am a founder and investor in novathor, the company that developed this photobiomodulation treatment for it. They've completed 18 randomized controlled clinical trials, pooled the data. It's being compiled now for FDA, going to be submitted for a PMA, and that is the highest level of FDA clearance or approval that you can get. They've shown that the mean score of 100 and something eyes was 5.5 letters on the Snellen chart. So the Snellen chart's that chart you go to with the ophthalmologist or the optometrist, and then obviously there's 5 letters per line, and you are able to see at least 1 line lower. The mean score is at least 1 line further down the chart, and for some patients up to 3 lines of improvement. For a disease that only ever goes the other way, you see, you work your way up the chart, unfortunately, because you can see only the bigger letters.
That's incredible.
It's huge.
And I have not heard that yet.
It's global. It's life-changing.
Huge.
It costs the country billions.
I have patients that are healthy, and they're structurally healthy. They have good mentation, good energy, and it is the macular degeneration. It's like their one health issue that's limiting them in their life. They stop being able to read, all of that. So were they using a special device, or can you go in the novathor and get these same kind of benefits?
They have pioneered something using an extra wavelength. There's something special about the eye, and that is it lets light in. So most of the visible light spectrum for us bounces off of our skin. The way we can see each other is your light's bouncing off of you, and it's bouncing off of me. We see each other. The thing about the eye is it's not bouncing off. So we've got a black spot in the middle of our eyes because light's going in. There's no light coming out from our pupil. It's all going in and staying in there. So some of the wavelengths we can't use on or pointless using on our skin are the shorter visible wavelengths because they don't penetrate. They just bounce straight off. So they have used 3 wavelengths, so a bit like us with the novathor, 616, 850, and they get to use 590 nanometer wavelength as well. It's a technique that they patented. It's particularly hits at the juiciest part of the mitochondria in there. Wouldn't work on anywhere else in the body. So they patented this technique. They got the 3 wavelengths that are known to work. Particularly this one they've added, and this triple wavelength thing is a patented technique.
So you've got the red, the near infrared, and then what is the?
It's a yellow.
It's a yellow.
Yes, so 590 nanometers in there can go in places that red and infrared would be good, but with these extra wavelengths it's better.
I would say that it is very common for me to hear from my patients that they feel the novathor helps their eyeyesight.
Yes, well at the moment the novathor is not on the market. It's waiting for FDA. I think it's probably a minimum of 6 months away. It could be up to a year. The pace of way things move the FDA. So right now what you got is the second best.
Yeah.
Or rather, the only thing you've got, so it's the best.
Yeah. No, it is. And you don't have to have your eyes open, correct? Or do you?
We do open with Lumathera product, but you don't have to, no.
You don't.
The red and the near
even
infrared will go
penetrates right through the eyelids.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, but you can have your eyes open and it's not harmful.
Correct.
That is the cool thing.
Yeah.
There's so much to talk about. I'm kind of curious about the building of the novathor and what makes this particular device superior to other devices. Because there's a lot of red light therapies out there that you can get nowadays, but it's something to do with the power, the intensity, the kind of density of lights, the quality of the LEDs you're using. Can you kind of briefly go into that?
Yeah, in short terms, the main difference is we are proven safe, effective, and legal. So we're because we're a medical device, so we're scrutinised to a high degree, and we have to get independent verification of everything we do. So we're making sure that we really do deliver the light that we say that we do. And because of the way that we design it, we make sure every square inch of that novathor delivers the right amount of light, rather than the occasional spot of it in the body around the thing. We've got clinical trials that shows it's effective from randomised placebo-controlled clinical trials, and it's legal. So we make it according to the requirements of ISO 13485. It's a medical device standard. We are scrutinised. We're audited every year. So we have all the reliability and expectations you'd have of safe and effective medical procedures. Yeah.
Well, it to me feels like the superior device, compared to the other ones that I've used. And I like the fact that you're laying in, just for our audience, you'll see a picture probably on the website, but it almost looks like an old-fashioned tanning bed where you have the light coming from below, and then you're putting this kind of light
clamshell.
It's a clamshell, above, and it's treating your whole body at one time. So the amount of photon exposure is much better than you're getting with a wall device or a spot treatment, and it feels so good. And then you mentioned something about healing and regeneration. I have an interesting anecdote. I don't know if your company tagged me in social media because I was staying in a hotel and I woke up at night to use the bathroom in the dark and came back from the bathroom to my bed and smashed right into this half wall.
Right.
Because I felt for the wall. I'm like, oh, here's the corner. Here's where I turn. Didn't know that there was a coffee bar with a half wall that had a crown molding around it exactly at the level of my forehead. I gashed my forehead wide open, just like gushing blood. And then I had to speak in person, first kind of like in-person conference that I was speaking at post-COVID, like 1 week later. And so I went into the NOVOTHOR every day and documented my healing from before and after. And you could literally see in one day the healing that would occur. So it was absolutely what allowed me to go to the conference a week later, put a tiny bit of makeup on that, and you really didn't even notice it. So, and you can't notice it today. I mean, like I probably should have had some plastic surgery, but if I didn't have the NOVOTHOR. But anyway.
Men worry about that every day because we shave and you can be unlucky with a razor blade sometimes.
Yeah.
And I always worried about I'm going to do so. Or maybe I was going to come, I'm coming here, and is this the day I'm going to cut myself shaving on the way here? And given that my opening story for an audience, when I first get on stage to a new audience that don't know what photobiomodulation is, to tell them my Star Trek story. So I'll tell your audience, what is photobiomodulation? It's something you've seen on Star Trek, if you're old enough. If you're not old enough, ask your grandparents what Star Trek is. But on Star Trek, when somebody gets injured, they get taken to the sick bay, and the doctor gets out a laser beam, aims the laser at their injury, and the injury heals instantly. So we make those.
You do.
That's my opening thing. But it's not as fast as on TV, but you get the idea, we shine light on people and they heal more quickly. Just imagine me standing on stage with a big gash in my face because half an hour ago I was getting out the shower with the blood pouring down my face and I said, and it heals instantly. And I think well, didn't work on you then, did it? Like if I'd had a chance to, it doesn't work in half an hour. But a week is, you can definitely see it.
You can really see it day by day. Yeah, it definitely. And so we are JYZEN, and we are above like a phenomenal athletic facility down below. And so we attract a lot of athletes here that are interested in peak performance and, kind of body composition optimization and all of that. And maybe you could lay out some of the data on using the NOVOTHOR before a workout and the muscle gains that you have before weight training, let's say, the recovery times that you've seen. If you use it after a workout, is it better before the workout or after? What are your thoughts on that?
Right, so in a lot of laboratory studies, so that's where volunteers, usually students at universities, do exercises, and they find these things out, but just with one muscle group. So to make it less complicated, you do something like just a bicep curl or something, and have a biodex machine where you do this exercise. You see how much exercise you can do in a certain amount of time. And then by taking a blood test before they do the study and before and after they do the study immediately, and 1 hour, 1 day, 2 days, and 3 days after the study, with the blood test, you can look at the changes in creatine kinase, a marker for muscle damage. And you can also do tests for pain, and you can do tests for strength as well, and compare it with local cryotherapy treatments or placebo photobiomodulation treatments. So in very controlled conditions, we learned some things there, and what's clear from the data is people have considerably low, almost like show very little increase in biomarkers for muscle damage, so creatine kinase barely moves off the baseline, and we've got a correlate with that is the reduction in inflammation, so IL-6 will be something. We see a rapid return to full strength immediately, which you don't see it's nowhere close within, I don't know where it would be, it'd be like it's off the end of the study, but like 4, 5, 6 days later, before you get back close to your recovery, we're back there within 1 day in our thing. So you've got your strength and there are less pain as well.
And that's pre-treatment?
No, that was an after treatment.
Okay.
For subsequent studies have been comparing before, after, or both, and it's definitely better if you can do both. Both before and after seem to work equally well. But if you can do both, there seems to be an extra advantage in doing it.
That's interesting to hear. Okay, so would you still do like up to 20 minutes before and after, or would that get to be too much
I don't
exposure?
have data on that. I think that would have to come through some experimentation. I'd be guessing if I had to do that. It could be better to, I don't know, you have to find out. 10 minutes before you go and do your exercise, 10 minutes after. I mean, we're all busy as well, and it's hard to know. Are you getting an extra benefit if you did 20 and 20? I mean, and then you got your workout, and people barely have enough time for that either.
I know.
So it's a tough call. I mean, try 10 after, and if you maybe individual as well.
I'm going to start trying because I see my patients and then I always hit the gym downstairs, like, at 6 o'clock for a class or whatever. And if I go in the NOVOTHOR before I go to my spin class, for example, I have much more power and
less fatigue.
Less fatigue. It's much easier. But yet I feel more like powerful while I'm doing it. So, yeah.
In a study looking at cardiometabolic risk factors in obese women in an experiment, they it was a randomized controlled trial. Patients, they're not patients, but they're volunteers. They don't have a disease, so they're not patients, but volunteers who are overweight. Get photobiomodulation or placebo photobiomodulation for 15 minutes before they go to the gym and do some prescribed exercises, and you do it 3 times a week for some number of weeks, or they get a fake treatment as well. And one of the factors they looked at was what we call it in America, I think, inch loss, getting thinner, basically. So they measure the circumference of things like the waist, the hips, the neck, and that kind of thing. And the treatment group, sure enough, they get thinner, which is an interesting fact. Interesting also, by the way, they don't lose weight.
Right, so it's improving body composition, but not necessarily.
Possibly they're gaining more muscle.
More muscle,
yes. And they have reduced insulin resistance goes down as well. So all these wonderful factors. And the conclusion of the study, I'm trying to remember how they got to the conclusion, but the conclusion of the study is photobiomodulation doesn't make you thinner. But the other thing they did is they did more exercise as a consequence. So they could train harder as a result, and therefore they got less fat as example.
See, this is the type of thing we would data drive here because we do body composition analysis, and we could really just start doing kind of informal research on this.
Retrospective.
Yeah.
You don't need an IRB for that.
Right. You're asking me?
No, I'm telling you. Well, I don't know America, but in the UK, our National Health Service is very careful about you can't study people without their without the consent, but you can retrospectively look through old data and do an analysis of that. So they call that an audit. Yeah,
and that's what we're doing here. Is we're really pooling data streams at JYZEN, where people's blood labs, their body composition analysis, their Oura Ring sleep data, even data from other wearables like a smart scale, are getting uploaded to a software platform. And we're prescribing protocols that NOVOTHOR is part of, and maybe some of the other therapies we have here are included. And then they're able to kind of see what's happening with all of this data, all their personal biometric and blood laboratory data over time as they engage in these protocols. So it's really powerful. You're really giving the power back to people to kind of affect changes with their health.
Yes, that makes sense.
Yeah. One of the things I remember you telling me about before that I think would be cool for the group to know is the pre-treatment with NOVOTHOR even reduces a tendency toward getting a sunburn, or pre-treatment with NOVOTHOR would reduce radiation injury after an X-ray.
Right.
So it's like you're readying the body's kind of like defense systems by doing the NOVOTHOR. Can you speak about that? Yeah, so taking the last one first. So radiation dermatitis is a side effect from radiation treatments for cancer. And it's like, just imagine your worst sunburn ever and multiply it by a factor of 10. And you've got this, what people think is a radiation burn as a consequence in it. And so photobiomodulation has been used therapeutically to reduce that. So that means after they've already developed it. But it works even better if you can pre-treat or treat as they're going through the radiation. So cancer patients get the radiation every day for up to 6 weeks. And if they're photobiomodulation concurrently with everyone, not literally simultaneously, but immediately before or immediately afterwards, they have a significant, like 50% of the amount of radiation burn. There's been a study in Montreal where volunteers are given photobiomodulation 3 consecutive days before getting exposed to different levels of ultraviolet light. They have photobiomodulation to one leg, not the other leg. There's a placebo on that side. It's randomized, and then they give graded amounts of X-ray therapy ultraviolet light. And the more you get, the more erythema, sunburn that you get. And they compare the 2 legs, one that had real photobiomodulation, the other one that didn't, and you can clearly see, anybody can see, you've got half as much erythema on the photobiomodulation group. Unbelievable. Yeah. It's just such cool technology. And this is going back to the beginning where I said we switch on defensive mechanisms with this. And on that note, tell us if you have any data on immune system, like in terms of enhancing antiviral immunity, anti-cancer immunity.
So generally speaking, my answer regarding any infectious disease is photobiomodulation does not have any antimicrobial qualities. Certainly not directly.
Right.
So when you think of ultraviolet light, it can kill bacteria and viruses and fungal spores, but that's also potentially toxic for the cells in our body as well. So you might read about blue light therapies of having antimicrobial effects, and they do. And if you give a high enough dose, you can have that effect. There's a risk because you're approaching a window where it's actually bad for you as well and accelerates aging. How does blue light kill things? It increases the production of reactive oxygen species so much that it kills the cells, the bacteria dies. So you don't want that in your body, but anyway, it's possible with light. But the photobiomodulation of the red, near infrared, which is the other end of the visible spectrum, does increase the antimicrobial cells, if you like, so neutrophils, lymphocytes, the roots of macrophages, so your immune system, other monocytes, natural killer cells which go after cancer, Langerhans cells in your skin. So it does seem to improve the proliferation of these when they're needed, and they go after whatever it is they're going after, and you get these antigen-presenting cells do more of their job as well. So that's good for your immune system.
Right.
Hasn't been proven though, anywhere that I can think of immediately. I know we hear about hard-to-heal wounds, which are will frequently won't heal, partly because of the biofilm that they get. As a result, they seem to heal better, and they get fewer infections as a result. I haven't seen anybody prove that it reduces an infection with people like COVID, for example. There's lots of studies. I say studies, academic speculation, non-randomized studies, case series, anecdotal, but I find it hard to get to speak authentically, excitedly about it until I see a proper randomized trial.
And I appreciate that about you.
It ought to help, but we need the data.
I appreciate that about you, but it does feel like there's enough information to suggest like upregulation or at least modulation of the human innate immune system.
Yes.
So everyone of the staff people that work in this office, if they start feeling a little sick, they hop in the novathor.
I would certainly do it.
It is like we all know it makes you can kind of physically tell in your own body that I
couldn't promise it to the world yet, but I would certainly do that myself. I mean, through COVID, certainly, well, we use it anyway, but at home, but yes.
We've got a couple tools that we use here, but that's one of them.